And Shabbat Shalom to those who are in the future, or if you live all the way in New Zealand and Australia. And Shalom to all the rest of you. And I hope everyone's having a blessed day. And I'm Jose Passerell. I co-host this platform with Brandon Muchmore. We are stewards for Torah to the Tribes. And this platform is called the Melchizedek Study Group. And we cover different areas that have to do with the priesthood, including a prophecy calendar. Today we're doing actually the Torah portion for this week. So we are very blessed that we have been given an opportunity to study these things out and share what Yahuwah has revealed to us. So then hopefully it will edify you, and then you become, a better, more knowledgeable priest because of it. Well, I hope everyone is blessed by this teaching. This week's Torah portion is Bashalak, and that means when he let go, meaning when Pharaoh let them go out of Israel. So I'm going to go ahead and and after I'm going to go ahead and read up until the Song of Moshe. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to cover some areas up until that part and context of the Torah portion, and then Brandon's going to share with us more about the manna and about faith, and then I'll go ahead and close it up on the last couple of verses of the Torah portion, and then we will be open for comments and discussions thereafter. All right, so I wanted to share with you basically some things that at least put some context, because this is the first time we're actually doing a Torah portion in this platform. So wanted to just go ahead and give you a little bit of context and some of the parallels that we see throughout the Torah that will help us see the hand of Yahuwah and how he works, and the cyclical and the ways that he does things, and his character, and so important. And one of the things that I've been praying so much about lately, and that Yahuwah has put in my spirit for me to pray even more about, would be just to get to know him better, and such a great way to get to know him by sharing the Torah portions. Okay, so I just wanted to hopefully shed some light about who he is and what he has done for our forefathers and what he will be doing for us in the future. What a blessing, Father. What a blessed time we're living right now. All right, so again is Bishalak, when Pharaoh let go. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. So Abraham's experience in Egypt, okay, is pretty much a shadow picture of what happened to Israel right before they were let go, before Pharaoh let them go. Now, the Torah's description of Israel in Genesis 43 through Exodus 12 pretty much repeats key words and phrases and themes that are found earlier in the context of Genesis with Abraham's life, including in Genesis 12, 10 through 13. It suggests, and you're going to actually see that Israel's Exodus, okay, is very similar to what Abraham actually went through in his life when he was with Sarah, or Sarai at the time. And so we have, and I think it's because Moshe, when he wrote it, he just wanted to go ahead and use some of the same Hebrew words and some of the same phrases, so he can actually allow the reader to connect that these stories are very, very similar in nature, and also shows the hand of Yahuwah and his character in the life of Abraham, as well as the life of Israel, and and the portion and the multitude thereof that came out of Egypt. Now, in both accounts, we find a heavy famine in Genesis 12:10 and also 43:1. We also see the descent to Egypt that Abraham took in Genesis 12:10. Okay, and just that chapter alone in 12 is amazing how many parallels there are with the Exodus of Egypt. The life-threatening situation where the males, okay, were at risk, and that they were getting killed, okay, but what the females were not being touched, just like 12, Genesis 12:12, and Exodus 1:16. We had the captivity in Pharaoh's service, Genesis 12:15 and Exodus 1:1, and the plagues that came upon the Egyptians, Genesis 12:17 and Exodus, of course, 7 through 12, and the expulsion from Egypt because of the plagues, Genesis 12:20 and Exodus 12:33, and then the departure from Egypt with great wealth, Genesis 12:16 and 13:2, and then we see that again in Exodus 12:35, the plundering. So we have the story of Abraham and Sarai, and they were sojourners in Egypt due to the famine. Yahuwah striking of Pharaoh's house with plagues, and the exodus from Egypt with great riches, like back in Genesis 12:10, and reveals not only what happened to Abraham and Sarah, but also prefigures what will happen to Israel, okay, during this exodus, okay? Now, the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. On Exodus 13:18, but Elohim led the people around through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds. And the children of Israel went up armed out of the land of Mitzrayim. Israel, being the firstborn, are considered by its own definition of their name soldiers of Elohim, those who prevail with Yahuwah. Exodus 13:20 reads, so they took their journey from Sukkot and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. Now the place named Sukkot is where Israel pitched a tent for a temporary shelter before being led to Etham. This is where Yahuwah had gathered them so they could be under his covering. This temporary shelter represents the hedge of protection they received because they confide in Yahuwah's will as he led them out of Egypt. Now the 12 tribes were gathered at Sukkot, just as their father Israel had first camped at Sukkot when he returned to the land. Now, these were not the same physical locations, but they were obviously are meant to tell us something about Sukkot. Sukkot has more relevance to do with an appointed time where one can dwell for a temporary time in a tabernacle. Then it has to do with an appointed specific place. After parting with Esau, Jacob journeyed to Sukkot, a name which he gave to a place from the booths which were built to shelter his cattle, in Genesis 33:17. It was in the territory of God, and is mentioned with Beth Niram in Joshua 13:27. So the place that Israel traveled to after seeing Esau, to the place named Sukkot after departing from Ramses that was located in Egypt, are two distinctive geographical locations. And we have a third occasion that we see before that, who was dwelling in tents or tabernacles. Well, being mentioned is Abraham. When he left Babylon behind, okay, and his father from Ur. Another dark spiritual place like Egypt, left behind, and afterwards made him dwell in what? Tabernacles. Now, in Hebrew 11:8, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called out to the place which he would receive an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of the promise as a foreign country, dwelling in tents, Sukkot, or tabernacle, with Isaac and Jacob, their heirs with him of the same promise. Now, just like Yahuwah led Abraham out of Babylon, he led the 12 tribes of Israel out of Egypt. And the very first place they were led to was Sukkot, reminding them of the journey Abraham needed to take so he too could be freed from the spiritual darkness of slavery into the protection of Yahuwah and eventually be led to the promised land. So you see, he repeats the same thing. When we are indwelling with those who have spiritual discernment and we have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit with us, we start to realize that Yahuwah is wanting us to walk in that faith that Abraham had, because we are actually walking this out, because these promises and these cycles are going to start being manifested more and more in our lives. So it is best to be more in that character, be considered what? By faith, a righteous person. So we then too be aligned with him leading us into the promised land. And it's a wonderful thing. And I think this is where Israel they were somewhat blinded to see. Because Israel was what? He was blind. Back in Genesis 49. He could barely see. Israel could barely see. There was a blindness that came over the Israel until what? Mashiach, he said he came to make the blind see. And because Yahushua came, he was able to reveal the ultimate plan to gather the 12 tribes and focus on the faith through Abraham, Moshe, the 12 tribes, all the wisdom that was received through the kings, to Yahushua, and live according to the faith of the promises. And then we'll be able to walk just like Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and just be fruitful and multiply. And it's wonderful. So what do we see here? The first thing we see towards the beginning of the Torah portion, we have the Exodus 13:21. Yahuwah went before them day in the pillar of cloud to lead them in the way, by night in a pillar fire giving them light, so as to go by day and night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from the people. So what is this pillar? Yahushua is the only way, the light of the world. This represents Yahushua, who goes and prepares our path before us, protects us from behind and from the front. We have the character. I want to go over a little bit about the character of Moses. Also, it's important as we get into this Torah portions. Moshe was raised by the government of Egypt as a prince, and surely he had to have had cruel measures and hardened like Pharaoh to have been a military leader who was held in high esteem until he killed an Egyptian who was smiting a Hebrew, one of his own brethren, according to Exodus 2:11. Now, the fact that he just killed a man in cold blood show how misplaced his judgment was at the time. The father had to prepare him if he was going to use him. From a high level and hardened heart official of the military of Egypt, he needed to be brought down to a humble and meek man. This required transformation that was accomplished by him tending sheep for 40 years. Then after that, he was called and sent out to deliver Israel out of Egypt. The burning bush was on fire, yet it was not consumed. Here is the representation of what Yahuwah does for those who are called and what it takes to prepare them. The thorn bush of thistles symbolize the sinner who will be consumed of refined by fire. Matthew 13:11. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word. But the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of the riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. The life of Moshe in the courts of Egypt was full of riches and power, and the word would have been choked out if Yahuwah would have just grabbed them out of Egypt immediately and threw them back in there. It would have been choked out. But because Yahuwah intervened in his life, he changed Moses' circumstances by leading him to a life of a humble shepherd while burning out the thorns that Egypt made sure he carried with him. Yahuwah rescued Moshe so he could deliver the rest of the Israelites out of Egypt. From a burning bush to a burning mountain that represents the power of Yahuwah refining the 12 tribes of Israel through the Torah. After the breach of the golden calf, It was decided that Israel too was indeed of some spiritual refinement. They needed that. This is the time of testing and trial, that through much correction, one should come out more purified and rectified. Now, as the Song of Moses declared after they crossed the Sea of Reeds, states on Exodus 15:13, you in your mercy have led forth the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. Just as Moshe was a bush that had to be refined, so was Israel to receive the fire from heaven, so they could be refined to be a kingdom of priests. Exodus 15:17. You will bring them and plant them in the mountain for your inheritance. In the place, O Yahuwah, you have made for your own dwelling a sanctuary, O Yahuwah, which your hands are established. Moshe was able to see Yahuwah because his heart was finally pure, just as he expects our hearts to be pure. There were water purification rituals, immersions necessary that Yahuwah commanded Moshe to tell the people before going to the mountain so they could be in his presence. Blessed are those who have a pure heart, for they shall see Elohim. That comes right in the beginning of his sermon. Why is that so important? Because that's what it requires. That's what he wants from us, our heart. He wants to give you his heart, so then you can actually love people the way he wants you to love them. Who can be in the presence of Yahuwah in his holy mountain, but none other than they who have a pure and clean heart? Psalms 24:4. If the King of glory dwells in the holy city, then Psalms 24 asks, who can stand there? Who can stand and worship Yahuwah acceptably? The answer is clear and it's ethical. The one who has a clean heart and pure heart, according to 24:4. Psalms. Who may ascend into the hill of Yahuwah? We have also Proverbs 28. A king who sits on the throne of judgment scatters all evil with his eyes. Who can say, I have made me a clean heart. I am pure from my sin. That's what's required. I know I've made my heart clean in occasions, but it's something that it has to be guarded. I can't. Yahuwah, he is our protector. His joy is our strength. So let's have joy in our hearts and allow his protection of love for one another be the guard of our hearts and joy. So what we have here, we have the salvific hand of Yahuwah that destroyed the Egyptians and that allowed Israel to cross the Sea of Reeds. After the Mizrahites chased them, Israel that is, were led to cross the Red Sea, and then they were saved. Everything that has happened was because of their faith in Yahuwah, who brought them out of Egypt according to the direction and instructions of the Father. Where do we see this hand of salvation in this Song of Moses? Exodus 12:2. Yahuwah is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He's put in the context. There's a message of salvation. How does this salvation happen? How does Yahusha happen? Exodus 15:2. I'm sorry, 15:6. Your right hand, O Yahuwah, has become glorious in power. Your right hand, O Yahuwah, has dashed the enemies in pieces. Exodus 9:59. My hand shall destroy them. 15:12. You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. Exodus 15:17. Israel will be planted in a place Yahuwah has made for their own dwelling, a sanctuary that was established by his own hands. So from the beginning to end, his hand of salvation is doing the works of the Father. Now, the phrase sitting at the right hand of the Almighty also alludes to the power to the right hand of the Father that is written in Psalms 110:1, and directly connects Yahusha, who is ruling with authority, the authority of Yahuwah. Throughout the Old Testament, the right hand of Yahuwah was an indication of the power that comes out of Yahuwah. By his right hand, Yahuwah accomplished the works of creation, Isaiah 48:13. By his right hand, he defeated the enemies, as you know, in Exodus. And by his right hand, he saved those who took refuge in him, according to Psalm 17:7, 27, 65, and 118, 15 through 16. Psalms 17:7, and I'll read, show your marvelous loving kindness by your right hand. O you who save those who trust in you from those who rise up against them. Psalms 20, verse 7. Some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we will remember the name of Yahuwah, our Elohim. By the salvific hand of Yahuwah, the enemy was destroyed and Israel was saved. Praise Yahuwah. For Yahusha, for he is the right hand of the Father. So we also see that this song is very powerful, very prophetic. It also declares the kingship and rulership of Yahuwah. Now, this sovereign majestic reign of Yahuwah was actually first expressed in the Song of Praise and not in the book of Psalms, where one can normally discover his rulership and reigning power as we read through it. It's at least mentioned 5 times. The song ends with the climatic words, Yahuwah reigns forever and ever, in Exodus 15:18. This implies that it is no longer Pharaoh that is their ruler, but Yahuwah, who by much more power delivered Israel without raising a sword against the Egyptians. How powerful is that? The whole army was taken in the sea, and not a stone was thrown. Now, Yahuwah is ruler of all the earth. And this was declared to Pharaoh. But his heart was hard for him to accept the truth sometimes, right? That's why it's important to have a pure heart and a clean heart so we can receive and have faith and be encouraged by that. After Pharaoh pleaded with Moses and Aaron for Yahuwah to forgive him for sinning, then Moshe testified that the earth is Yahuwah's, making him ruler over all he sees. Exodus 9:29. So Moshe said to Pharaoh, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I will spread out my hand to Yahuwah. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is Yahuwah's. The earth is his. Exodus 19:14. Yahuwah says, there is no one like me in all the earth. Now, in the ancient world, the prime job of a king was to protect his people from the enemies and give them the laws and good government. The same basic principles and priorities we see today in some of our own governments. Now, 2 other texts in the Torah, apart from Exodus 15, that read in which Yahuwah is portrayed as king, are found in Numbers 23, 21, 23 through 23. Yahuwah is king, is the protector of all his people, and it reads, the shout of a king is among them. In Deuteronomy also, 33, verses 3 through 5. And it declares that his kingship and rulership is linked to giving the Torah as well. And he was king in Jerusalem when the leaders of the people were gathered, all the tribes of Israel together. Okay. So with this being said, we have a king ruling in heaven, and we are his priests. And we should Focus on the things that our king does for you. A king fights for you. He speaks for you. He gives you shelter. And he puts people in positions where they will be useful. So I pray that Yahuwah will be exalted in all his wonderful works, and I pray that he will keep increasing our understanding, knowledge, and direction in our lives, because these times are crucial. Our faith has to be stronger than ever. We're running to a lot of things in the world right now. The enemy is doubling down, and we too need to double down. But we don't do it through our own flesh or on works, but allow him to carry this through and have faith in that. I'm going to give it here to our brother Brandon. He's going to go ahead and continue with a topic about manna and faith.
All right, appreciate that, brother Jose. Just real briefly, because I'm not going to give a full. It was kind of funny. Jose and I were talking this week, and I was like, who's teaching or whatever, and I was telling him what I had going on and everything, and then he's like, yeah, I feel led to do this. And then when we started talking about it, I was like, yeah, I've actually been jotting down notes about faith and manna and stuff like that. And he's like, why does this not surprise me? Because the same spirit that dwells inside of you dwells inside of me and everything like that. And that's how in tune in the ruach or spirit that we are. But anyway, I'm not going to give a full teaching or explanation on Exodus 14 and 15 because I've already given it within the part 7 of the Exodus on My Mind series. I went in depth with how, just as we were singing, or they were singing the song of Moshe in Exodus 15, that we will, Yah willing, those who are left standing, not Sab, will be singing the song of Moses again. And that's what that whole teaching was about. So if you haven't seen that series on Exodus on My Mind, it's on Yahuwah's servant. And I would really encourage you. I pray that it would bless you and edify you and strengthen you. It's honestly one of my favorite sermons that I've ever done, or teachings that I've ever done. But just a couple of thoughts just on Genesis 15 that I had is, I'm going to attempt here to share my screen here. Give me 1 second. See if I can remember how to do this. It's been so long. There we go. All right. So one thing that jumped out at me is verse 3, where it says, Yahuwah is a man of battle, or the Hallelujah scriptures, I think it was, said Yahuwah is a man of war. So that's another king, or another attribute of a king, is war, protection, provider, protector, right? Yahuwah is his name. And then the other part was, especially in the times that we're in, with I'll just call it the plagues that are in the land, right? Well, there's specific instruction given to us for protection, okay? And I've been talking about this theme, or we've been talking about this theme of Yahuwah's covering is his covenant. So when we walk in his covenant, we are under his covering. That's how it works, right? Again, I go into more detail in that teaching I just referenced with Exodus on My Mind, part 7. But that's what Psalm 91 is about. It's a marital position, that talit, taking that talit in a Hebraic. Sorry, my phone just wigged out. But but taking that, that talit in a Hebraic wedding ceremony or marriage ceremony, and the husband puts it over him and his bride, and that's what it's all about. It's a position. It's a that covering is the marriage covenant. That's what it is between Yahuwah and his people Yisrael. Okay, but it says in verse 26, and he said, if you diligently obey the voice of Yahuwah your Elohim and do what is right in his eyes, and shall listen to his commands and shall guard his laws, I shall bring you none of the diseases, or let me see what it says. Yeah, it does say diseases. I brought on the Mitzrites, for I am Yahuwah Nisi, Yahuwah who heals you. Okay, or no, Yahuwah Rapha. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, but Yahuwah who heals you. Okay. And then the next thing I want to touch, just real brief, is I noticed that when they came to Elam in that next verse, that there are 12 fountains there. Okay. 12 fountains of water, and there were 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the waters. Well, why are there 12 fountains and 70 palm trees? Of course, it's representation of the 12 tribes, right? There are 12 fountains or 12 wells, some translations say, and 70 palm trees represent the 70 elders of Israel that would come and in a few chapters later when they actually committed to the book of the covenant, everything else. Okay, so say all that to say this. So we're talking about manna, right? So we're going to look at Exodus 16. We're going to look at a little bit of John chapter 6, and then we're also going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10 also. Okay, so just bear with me. We're going to be jumping around a little bit, but the question that I this was 3 days ago when I felt this question in my spirit is, are we still relying upon the manna from the wilderness like our fathers ate and died, or are we actually eating from the bread of life? I'll say it again. Are we still relying upon the manna from the wilderness like our fathers ate and died, or are we actually eating from the bread of life? Why do I say that? Well, this is a very important passage of the time in which I believe that we're in, and we're going to continue to accelerate into. Okay, and part of our journey, we talked about our Stephanie and I's personal journey out of Babylon. When we went over Covenants of Promise Part 1, we talked about leaving some of those comforts of Babylon, and Jose referred to Abraham leaving Babylon, and that's exactly what happened. Genesis 15 clearly says where he was leaving, the land of the Chaldeans. That's Babylon. Okay, so we all have to exit Babylon, but as we exit Babylon, we're leaving behind the comforts of Babylon, or the comforts of Egypt, right? Which is why right here, because see, it was a mixed multitude that came out of the Exodus, is and right here in verse 22 is when this testing starts, when this trial starts. Okay, Moshe brought Yisrael from the Sea of Reeds, and they went out to the wilderness of Shur, or some translations say Sin. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And they came to Marah, and they were unable to drink because the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. So they called the name Marah. And the people grumbled against Moshe, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then he cried out to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah showed him a tree. And when he threw it into the waters, they were made sweet. There he made a law and a right ruling for them. There he tried them. Okay. So it's very important to understand that, yes, Yahuwah does test us. Yahuwah does try us to see how we respond, just like he did back then. But he doesn't tempt us. There's a difference. Okay. James talks about that. Let no one say that he is tempted by Elohim, right? We're not tempted by Elohim, but we are tested and we are tried. We're put in positions and situations where it's to see what areas we need to work on. Okay, I'll put it like that. Like, the way you test to see if you've plumbed something right is putting pressure in the line. Okay, if you have no leaks, once you put pressure into the line, that that it's going to hold up under pressure. And that's what it's all about, is the times that we're in. That's part of what Jacob's trouble is about, is seeing it, because he's refining his bride. Okay, he's sifting through the wheat and the chaff. The chaff is blowing away, but the wheat is weighted down by his presence, right? By his glory. That's what Moshe wanted. Show me your glory. He wanted his glory to rest upon him, that weightiness to rest upon him, his presence to rest upon him, and weigh him down, hold him down, right? Be that anchor. But that's what this is all about. And so, like, I think we've been here close to I think it's 4 months now or something like that, pretty close to that. And we've been learning new things, working outdoors, working with our hands, all that kind of stuff. And also, for me, I've had to change the way I was used to eating, or the convenience of just be able to go right around the corner or what have you. But the point is that the wilderness is a testing period. It's a trial period to let our flesh, it's going to manifest, so that way we can chop it down and crucify it more and lay it upon the altar. Otherwise, we're going to end up like those in the wilderness, which we're going to read about in a second, who were slain. And one thing that he was telling me, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before, but just because you're included in the Exodus does not guarantee us the promised land. Okay, there were 600,000 men. I think Jose just mentioned that, actually, but there were 600,000 men, not including women and children, that came, approximately, of course, that came out of Mitzrayim, that came out of Egypt, that mixed multitude. And only 2 men, Joshua and Caleb, who followed Yahuwah completely, actually entered the promised land and saw it with their own eyes. Everyone else, because they grumbled and complained or didn't follow Yahuwah's directions to the T, they were slain at some point. That's why they wandered around the wilderness for 40 years, is so that they would all die in the wilderness at some point. Okay, so it's a testing time, it's a trial time, and that's what this is all about. So, bread from heaven. So these 2 chapters of Exodus 16 and then John chapter 6 is probably one of the best and most obvious parallels that we will ever get out of the Torah portions. That and probably Exodus 15 and Revelation 15 as well. Those 2 are just very boom, in your face, very obvious. You don't need a deep knowledge of the word to really see that. But let's look at this word for Elam here. So Elam, hang on, let me pull it up this way. I'm just going to read it off the screen. Sorry, was reading the wrong word. I clicked on the from, not Elam. So Elam is Strong's H362. Elam, okay? Plural of H352, palm trees, Elam, a place in the desert. Okay, that's what it's about, and it's from Ilil. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Here we go. Or Ayil, maybe that's how you say it. Okay, from the same as H193, Yule, properly strength, hence anything strong, specifically a chief, politically a ram, pilaster as a strong support or like a pillar, an oak or other strong tree, mighty man, lintel, oak, post, ram, tree, right? So what are we called to be? You know, when we do the commands of Yahuwah, do what Yahushua says to do, you know, that he said he will be like a tree planted by many waters, right? So that's what we're called to be, is that, okay? So it says in verse 2, and all the congregation of children of Israel grumbled against Moshe and Aharon in the wilderness. So there's that tendency to want to grumble, to complain, okay? And the children of Israel said to them, if we had only died by the hand of Yahuwah in the land of Mitzrayim, when we sat by the pots of meat and we ate bread to satisfaction. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to put all this assembly to death with hunger. And Yahuwah said to Moshe, see, I am raining bread from the heavens for you. And the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day in order to try them, whether they will walk in my Torah or not. So again, he tries us to see whether or not we will walk in his Torah or not. And it shall be on the 6th day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And Moshe and Aharon said to the children of Israel, at evening you shall know that Yahuwah has brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And in the morning you shall see the glory or esteem of Yahuwah, and he hears your grumblings against Yahuwah. And what are we that you grumble against us? Now, side note real quick, because this is a conversation of the plural ehad right here that Jose was just referring to between Yahuwah and Yahusha, because that's what's going on here. That verse 7, he hears your grumblings against Yahuwah. So Yahuwah hears your grumblings against Yahuwah. Okay, that's what that's talking about. And Moshe said, in that Yahuwah gives you meat to eat in the evening, in the morning bread to satisfaction. For Yahuwah hears your grumblings, which you make against him. And what are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Yahuwah. Oh, hang on, sorry. There it is, verse 9. And Moshe said to Aharon, say to the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before Yahuwah, he has heard your grumblings. And it came to be as Aharon spoke to the congregation of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and see, the esteem of Yahuwah appeared in a cloud. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, I've heard the grumblings of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you are to eat meat, and in the morning you will be satisfied with bread, and you shall know that I am Yahuwah, your Elohim. And it came to be that quails came up at the evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and see, the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. And the children of Israel saw, and they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Moshe said to them, it is the bread which Yahuwah has given you to eat. Okay. And then jumping down the next verse, and this is the word which Yahuwah has commanded. Let every man gather it each according to each one's need, an omer for each bean, which an omer is a tenth of an ephah, according to the number of beans. Let every man take for those who are in his tent. So what's interesting about the manna is, of course, the manna is another prophetic shadow picture of Yahusha. Yahusha is the bread of life, right? And that's why he was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread, right? But also, just like with the Passover in Exodus 12, they took of the Passover lamb as much, each took according to what their needs were, right? According to how many people they had in their home, and same thing with the manna as well. Okay. And the children of Israel did so, and they gathered some more and some less, and they measured it by omers. And he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered according to his need. And Moshe said, let no one leave any of it until morning. And they did not listen to Moshe, so some of them left part of it until morning, and it bred worms. Now, what I want to touch on here, I'm not going to continue to read this whole thing, but the question I have is, or the thing I got out of this is that they were walking in the flesh so much or so strongly that it blinded their faith. That's why they actually broke the command of what Moshe was telling them about not leaving any of it until morning, which again, same with Passover, right? You eat it all between the evenings, leave none of it until morning. What's left in the morning, burn by fire, right? And let it be consumed, but basically no leftovers with Passover, right? And it's the same thing with the manna. Okay, it's a daily bread, and I didn't even think about this, but when I laid out these Torah portions, in the day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, sometimes I'll have a Shabbat first, sometimes not, most of the time not. But when I did that, I was thinking about the daily bread, but it didn't hit me until I really read this verse. I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly why I did it. Because instead of, I know the traditional way is to, read it all, like basically wait all week and then read it all on Shabbat and then discuss what you're reading. But it's supposed to be daily bread. You're supposed to eat the scroll every day, right? But either way, anyway, but they were walking in the flesh so much that it blinded their faith in Yahuwah. They had just seen Yahuwah deliver them, like Brother Jose talked about, with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, through the plagues of Egypt, and also through the Sea of Reeds crossing, where Yahuwah fought for them if they only stood still. And yet they still had doubt in their hearts. See, they were so focused on food and having water that's why they tried to store some away. Like, oh well, let me take some of the omer that I gathered today, but I'll stick it away for leftovers from the morning or for the next day, just in case it doesn't come back the next morning. Even though Yahuwah was telling them that this is going to be a daily thing. I'm going to feed you in the evening with quail, and then in the morning I'm going to feed you with the manna. But that's why they did that, is because they doubted. They lacked the faith to believe that, and that's what I believe we're in these days. Okay, we're in these days. I'm feeling it personally. Our family's feeling it, as well. Where we're truly, as Babylon is starting to shove us out of society, And I'll just kind of briefly reference, through these so-called mandates and everything, and we're having to make tough decisions of, how do I feed my family? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I live without a paycheck? How do I get by? But it takes a lot to live on faith. It takes a lot to live off the land. It takes a lot to say that, and to put into action that Yahuwah is truly going to supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory. Right? Because a paycheck or your own business or whatever it is, that's an easy thing to rely upon. It's something that's continuous and it's usually always there. And you work, you get paid, you work, you get paid, but actually living a life of faith like our ancestors did, or some of our ancestors did, is truly, truly difficult. Okay. Not saying it can't be done, but it's not something that is done easily. And honestly, that's a good thing, because that means that, you enjoy the spoils of victory, so to speak, when you have those mountaintop moments that much more, because you know what it took to get there. But think about the faith it took, like Jose was referencing, for Abraham to leave everything that he knew, everything that was familiar to him, which is what leaving Babylon's about, or leaving Mitzrayim is about, leaving those pots of meat and the stacks of bread that were there, and coming into the wilderness, and beginning to, live as, I think they would call them vagabonds, nomads, and literally they followed, that pillar of cloud, or that cloud by day and that pillar of fire by night is what they followed. And whenever the Spirit moved, they moved. Whenever the Spirit rested, they rested. And they lived off of whatever they could find on the land, whatever they had available. That's what they lived off of, or, in their livestock and everything like that. But that's what it was all about for them. They did not believe that Yahuwah would provide all of their needs daily. And this is why they tried to store up more and to keep some for the next day. And this is also why, when they went out on the Shabbat, that, it came to be in verse 27, and it came to be that some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found none. It's the same reason, is because that lack of faith, right? That lack of faith. And then this is what, Yahuwah's response is: how long will you refuse to guard my commands and my Torah? See, because Yahuwah has given you the Sabbath, therefore he's given you bread for 2 days on the sixth day, or a double portion, right? Let each one stay in his place. Do not go in and out of his place on the seventh day. He wasn't saying like literally don't leave your tent, but what he was saying is don't go outside your tent to go and look for the manna, because it won't be there. That's what he's really saying, right? But I would just encourage, as we continue to read through this section of the Torah portions, to pay attention to the locations that are mentioned, like the Elam, right here at the end of Exodus 15, the beginning of Genesis or Exodus 16, and then obviously wilderness of sin. I mean, there's no coincidence that that it's called the wilderness of sin, right? But look up the names of these different places where they traveled to and where they stayed, because Yahuwah doesn't do it just out of happenstance. It's there for a reason, okay? me see here. So what is Yahusha trying to teach us here? And I'm not going to read the whole thing of John 6 because obviously this is a really long chapter. But he says basically, you know, he says that after, and I don't even remember how many people were fed, whether it was like 4,000 or 5,000 or something like that. But he said that, you know, why did you, you know, they came because they had bread, right? There was food here. If you read, and so see, you know, this is why they're asking him for a sign. It says on the next day, the crowd that was standing on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there except the one that his taught ones had entered, and that Yahusha had not entered the boat with his taught ones, and his taught ones went away alone. But other boats came from Kinnereth, near the place where they ate bread after the master had given thanks. And I think that was in John chapter 5 when that occurred. You can look it up later. Therefore, the crowd saw that Yahushua was not there, and his taught ones, and they themselves entered the boats and came to Capernaum seeking Yahushua. Having found him on the other side of the sea, they asked him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Yahushua answers them and said, Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me, not because you saw signs or miracles, but because you ate loaves and were satisfied. Do not labor for the food that is perishing, but for the food that is remaining to everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give you. For the Father Elohim has set his seal upon him. So they said to him, what should we do? What should we do to the works of Elohim? To work the works of Elohim, sorry. Yahushua answered them and said, this is the work of Elohim, that you believe in him whom he sent. So they, oh, hang on, sorry. I messed up my thumb the other day, so I'm trying to maneuver my mouse with an injured thumb, so apologize. There it is. This is the work of Elohim, that you believe in whom he sent. And they said to him, what sign would you do so that we see with our eyes and believe you? What would you do? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness, and has been written, he gave them bread out of the heaven to eat. Therefore, Yahushua said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, Moshe did not give you the bread out of the heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread out of the heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who comes out of the heaven and gives life to the world. They said, Master, give us this bread always. Yahushua said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not get hungry at all, and he believes in me shall not get thirsty at all. But I said to you that you have seen me and still do not believe. All that the Father gives me shall come to me. And the one who comes to me I shall by no means cast out. Because I have come down out of the heaven, not to do my own desire, but the desire of him who sent me. This is the desire of the Father who sent me, that all he has given me, I should not lose of it, but should raise it in the last day. And this is the desire of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son believes in him and should possess everlasting life. And I shall raise him up in the last day. Therefore, the Yahudim grumbled against him, because he said, I am the bread which came down out of heaven. They said, is this not Yahusha, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I have come down out of heaven? And Yahushua answered and said to them, do not grumble with one another. No one is able to come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And I shall raise him up in the last day. It has been written in the prophets that they shall be taught by Yahuwah. Everyone then who has heard from the Father, learned, comes to me. Not that anyone who has seen, not that anyone has seen the Father except he who is from Elohim. He has seen the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me possesses everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread of life, this is the bread which comes out of the heaven, so that anyone might eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came out of the heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he shall live. And indeed, the bread that I give is my flesh, and I give this for the life of the world. So basically, what he's trying to teach us here is that we can't be so focused on, in Matthew 4:4, he references it as well, that men shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Elohim. And these are truly the days that I believe that we're starting to see come to pass, and will continue to see come to pass as well as we go forward into the oncoming months and years, however long it takes, or however long Yahusha tarries, right? But this is what it's all about right here, is in these two chapters, Exodus 16 and 17. It's the heart of the people. Do they fully trust in Yahuwah to provide for them? Just like he provided a way out and made a way where it seems to be no way, and set them free from the bondage of slavery, that they're so focused on the physical. They're so focused on their flesh. They're so focused on satisfying their flesh that their spirits are dying, right? Their spirits aren't actually dying, but I'm just saying their spirits are starving is what I meant to say. Because when you read again, it's like, man, like, you guys ever stop complaining? Because, you complained in Exodus 14. You said, Moshe, did you bring us out into the wilderness? Were there not enough graves in Egypt for us that you brought us in the wilderness to die? Because they thought the Egyptians were going to kill them. Then they saw the demise of the Egyptians at the hand of Yahuwah. And then and they saw him provide a way out, like I was saying with the Sea of Reeds crossing. And then, then he literally provides manna from heaven and quail, and yet they're still complaining, oh, well, now we lack water, and it's like, wow, like, where is this where's this going to? Where's this going to? Like, why do they keep doing this? But remember, it was a mixed multitude that came out, and not everyone has the same level of faith or dedication to Yahuwah, and that was the situation. Some were the people that were striving and grumbling and complaining with Moshe. They didn't have the same level of faith as some others. That's why they're so focused on, why do you try Yahuwah, right? And there he says again, or there they say again, why did you bring us out of the land of Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? And then Moshe cries out to Yahuwah, what am I to do with this people? Yet a little while they shall stone me. So the point is that I truly believe, like I was saying, that we're entering into these times where we can no longer focus on which we shouldn't have been focused on it anyway, but we were just part of our sinful nature. But we were so focused on the easy way, as far as like oh, well, oh, I have my job, my paychecks coming in, everything like that. And because it takes no real faith, to trade hours for dollars, or have your own business, or what have you, as long as you keep having clients come in, but when you truly have no way, because of, you want to stand for your faith, and that you can't succumb to the mandates, because you're going to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and not bow down to the king's commands, just like Daniel 3, that you're like, man, like, what am I going to do? And that truly, when we get to the place of what am I going to do, that's truly when our faith really begins. Because what faith is there that's needed when, all of our needs are being met, but it's not even being met, and I'm not saying it's not coming from Yahuwah, because of course, he gives us every position that we get, and promotion comes from him, and so on and so forth. But what I'm saying is that it seems like we're so involved with it, right? Because we just trade, hours for dollars. Hours, get a paycheck, dollars, right? But when that stops, or when you take yourself off of Social Security, or whatever other benefits, government benefits, are available to you, because they say, oh, well, hey, you gotta sign up for the juice, and you're like, nope, I'm not taking the juice, and then you're cut off. That's when our faith begins. When we can no longer do it on our own, that's when our faith begins. And that's when our faith begins to be, tested and tried. And truly, that's what this whole, something happened.
We're going to at least hear you.
Oh, all right. That was weird. But that's where our faith truly begins, is when we get to the end of ourselves, right? Is, when we're like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I go about, and pay the bills that I have to pay, and everything like that? And we truly have to believe that, he is I think it says in the Psalms, the owner of the cattle on 1,000 hills, and it's all his anyway. And, he can cause hearts to open, and money to flow in, and everything like that. Or, I mean, he could literally cause, the manna could literally come back, but we also can't be picky, because that's another thing that I'm learning in the season that I'm in, is I can't be picky, because oops, what did I just do? Sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. Jose, take the spotlight off me. Go back to the group view. But, what we were doing in, oh, there it goes. I removed it. Well, I think I removed it. There we go. Sorry. But, in Babylon, we tend to be picky, or we tend to have our certain comfort foods, or comforts, or, just things that we're familiar with. But as we journey into the wilderness, it goes from comfort to survival, and that mindset changes, and those priorities change. And it's like, and, even for me, it's part of it's been really good for me, is that that I have forced myself to change, as far as what I eat and everything like that, and being more open to, certain foods and everything like that, because out of necessity, you know, because there's want and then there's need, you know. And let's be real, I mean, our flesh, you know, eventually you'll be like, man, like after, I don't know, probably even like 3 weeks to 4 weeks or something, you know, your flesh would be like, wow, like we're having the same manna for breakfast and the same quail for dinner every single day. But guess what? He still supplied all their needs according to his riches and glory. May not have been what they wanted, but he gave them food to eat. You know, the bread in the morning and that manna, you know, and he will supply for us. It may not be what our flesh desires at that moment, but he will supply for us. You know, but it's a heart check for us. Will we follow him completely? That's what it's all about. Because just like with them, you know, 600,000 of them, 600,000 men approximately came out of Mitzrayim, but only 2 followed him completely. And not even Moshe was one of them, because the account that we read about in Exodus 17, where Yahuwah told him to strike the rock. In Exodus 17, he told him to strike the rock of Horeb and cause the water to flow out from it, right? But later on, I think it's in the book of Numbers, he says to him to speak to the rock. But instead, he strikes it twice. So he strikes it again. And that's one of those moments where you're like, wait, like, didn't he do what Yahuwah told him to do? But then, you know, you have to read that really carefully and you'll see, oh, wait, no, Yahuwah actually told him to speak to the rock. But the last time he told him to strike it. But that one thing right there was what cost Moshe. He only could see, across the valley to the promised land, but he never actually set foot in it at all. He died in the wilderness just like everybody else. And the only 2 were Joshua and Caleb, which were part of the 12 spies that went out and spied on the land. And those were the only 2 that gave that good report. And it says during that part, when they're given that report, I think it's in Numbers 13, that they followed Yahuwah completely. And that's what it's all about, is will I follow him completely? Will I lay aside everything that so easily entangles me, every sin that so easily entangles me, take up my cross, my stake, and follow him? That's what it's about, following him wherever he goes. So anyway, Jose, I think you said you wanted to finish up with 17.
Yes, yeah, just the last 2 or 3 verses. Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Thank you for all the insights, and you're right. Yeah, it's about doing that, right? Doing the what he is put in our hearts to do by faith, and absolutely, if we're gonna enter the land, that's what he requires from us, but also holding on to the promise that Abraham he made to Abraham. So because we are inheritors of those promises. And well, so I think this is going to actually really add to what Brandon actually was saying. It really is aligned with what he's saying and the message that he brought forth. Because there's a difference between being victorious Yahuwah, and also because of lack of faith being defeated. Okay, and we see the difference throughout. When they came out of Egypt, then covenant, golden calf, and then thereafter, there was a lot of the same things happened. A lot of them did not change their heart; they were still stiff-necked from the time they left Egypt. And but we see that there was a difference between when things were done by faith and things were done because sometimes it's just an obligation. All right. Now, Moshe, you know the story. Moshe held up his hand, and Israel prevailed. And when he let his hands down, Amalek prevailed. Okay, so what is the significance of holding his hands up? When he penetrated the veil into the heavens, it's a form of worship, exalting him. Exodus 17:12, Aaron and Hur supported Moshe's hand, one on one side and the other one on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Now, Yahuwah defeated the Amalekites with Moshe raised his arms, praising Yahuwah and doing things according to his commandments. But later, we see that they were defeated, as it is written on Numbers 14, verse 43 and 40 through 45, because they defied Yahuwah by trying to enter the land without Yahuwah's presence, as they transgressed because they wanted to enter the land after Yahuwah had told them, except for Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. By no means you shall enter that land. They didn't think that it was needed Yahuwah for this, obviously. And that was a very bad decision, obviously, as the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountains came down and attacked them and drove them as far back as Horman. Now, while the Israelites are now defeated in Hormah, the next generation ended up experiencing their first victory at Horman nearly almost 40 years later. Now, the name Horman means destruction, derives from Israel later triumph. We also see by faith, Moshe did something righteous. He raised his hands, elevating and honoring our father's involvement to defeat the Amalekites. But later, those who were grumbling had no faith in his involvement because of what they did, because they didn't listen, and they were ultimately defeated. Galatians 3:21, and this is, I'm going to read this because by then they were already keeping the book of the law. Okay, and we know by the works of the book of the law, administered by a different priesthood, there is really cannot make you righteous, can it? For the law had been given that those that could give life. Then righteousness would indeed be by the law. And in the context, we know that he's talking about the book of the law. But if we live by faith, just like Abraham and Moses did, and we heed to his voice and commandments, that we would be counted as righteousness. And Yahuwah would have been granted mercy, maybe some grace, allowing them to enter as a result of their faith, as Abraham even had faith in Yahuwah. But we see the opposite effect and the opposite results happen. Deuteronomy 9:6. Therefore, understand that Yahuwah, your Elohim, is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are stiff-necked people. On the other hand, we have Abraham accepting the promise made by Yahuwah. Hebrews 6:12. Imitate those who, through faith and patience, inherit the promises. And we see why Yahuwah had favored Abraham. In Genesis 26:3, dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all this land, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father, and I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. And I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, statutes, and my Torah. Okay, this is before Exodus 19 through 24. There were already a set of laws in place that Abraham followed because he had faith by what Yahuwah was asking him to do. and what was expected of him. Abraham was considered a righteous man because of his faith Yahuwah had, and then would fulfill the promise, and because he kept our father's instructions, he was favored. There are numerous parallels between Israel's journey through the wilderness and Mount Sinai. And this journey through the wilderness to Mount Sinai is to the promised land. Brandon mentioned a few just now, which we see that their grumbling didn't stop. Israel complained after the 3 days journey on Exodus 15:22. But we see that again on Numbers 10:33 and 11:1. And they kept complaining, reminding them of the journey. And we see that all the way into 15:24, and then in Numbers 14. Now, then again, we see Israel longing for food, like our brother Brandon was mentioning on Exodus 16:3. And then we see that again on Numbers 11:4-5. And the manna and the quail, they did it again on Numbers 11:6 through 35. But see, now there is something that Yahushua came to also prove, and that is that he replaced all these things, for he is the bread of heaven. He is the manna that we need, that is from heaven, the true manna. They also complain about, well, they didn't follow exactly the Shabbat, how they should have kept. We have Exodus 16:27, and then Numbers 15:32 again. See, they were stiff-necked people all the way from the beginning. Okay, then they got those, that extra time, right? Let's try to get you through that time of trial and testing. Israel quarrels with Moshe and ask him to be brought them out of. Why did he bring them out of Egypt? And they say, oh, well, we want to go, but we left all this wonderful things, and now we're out here. Well, they complain twice, Exodus 17 and Numbers 20 as well. And then they actually question the Elohim that's with them on Exodus 17:7, and then the Numbers 11:20. Okay, after everything that Yahuwah did for them. But see, on Hebrews, okay, the prophecy is fulfilled, 8:11. No longer will each one teach his neighbor or brother, saying, know Yahuwah, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, for I will forgive their iniquities and remember their sins no more. Why do we know him? Because of the revealed Son. That's how we know him. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can get to the Father except through him. If you know Yahushua, you know the Father, and the Father will dwell in you and live in and make his household in you. And it's a blessing. Did we have Israel complaining for provisions of water from the rock? Exodus 17:6, and then again Numbers 20, and then verse 10 and 11. But then we see Yahushua, and we see in what does it say? And he showed me a river of water of life, bringing bright as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of Yahuwah and of the Lamb. So that's the water that we want to drink out of. That is the spiritual water that brings life. But it requires sometimes that faith turns into obedience. Okay. Now again, of course, they complain about the battles and against the Amalekites, but we see that there was a difference. There were there was. Now we win that battle because Yahushua, he is a conqueror of all, and we live through that. His conquering reign. And the brand that he touched up on, Joshua and Caleb, right? The two spies, they actually brought a good report, but why did they get 40 years in the land? Because two false, and he wanted those two false witnesses to represent their 40 years in the wilderness. It wasn't because of the good report that Joshua and Caleb brought. The two false witnesses, those 40 days of spying turned into 40 years according to the scriptures. But those are the 40 years of trial. Even though it might have been somebody else's fault, we still have to go through those trials. But you know what? We endure till the end. We endure, and we heed, and we get closer, and we press in, and we try to basically have a close relationship to the Father and serve Him and serve His Son, and we'll be fine. And we'll go through all the trial and testing. but they're there for our own good. They're there to refine us and make us stronger. And for that, we are truly, truly blessed. Well, I think we are already almost an hour and a half into this. So I hope that everyone was, enjoyed this teaching. And if anyone has like now any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Roger.
Yeah, I just thank you guys so much for this. This challenges my heart because I just finished up doing the New Man series. And if you look at what's happening, that's where Yah's trying to bring us. It's the whole picture of that right there. He promised Israel that he would take him out of Egypt, but the promise was also that he'd bring him into a land flowing with milk and honey, And so when they went out into the wilderness, I was reading a while back that he gave them the manna, and I was just noticing that one of the ingredients in the manna was he gave them a little taste of honey. Gave them a taste of it, but the flowing of honey was in the land. They had to go in there to get the fullness of it,
Right.
And so with that being said, it challenges my heart because that's where I want to be, my own heart. I want to be fully in with him, and if Yah has to send ravens to feed you, he'll do it, if you're where he wants. But
Right.
Anyway, that's where Yah wants us is that you look at Joshua and Caleb when they went into the land. The other spies went in there and they saw the giants were like grasshoppers in their sight. Joshua and Caleb, he remembered what happened at the Red Sea and the promise that was given to them to go into the land. And to Joshua and Caleb, before Yahweh, the giants looked like grasshoppers before him. And it was a battle already won, and that's where the new man comes in because it all ties together. It's already been given to us, and as priests, we walk in that day by day, and Yah takes care of us, and so my burden on my heart is not just to walk like that, but also we think that we want to do this so that we can take care of our own needs. But you think about it, Yahweh did that with Israel because he was using that nation to be a testimony to the nations around of the one true Elohim, that they would look at Israel and see who Yahuwah was like in the midst of the nations, And so that's the challenge in my heart is to be that way, because that's what, as we approach this time at the end, the people would look at us and say, this is Yahweh, this is what he's like because he's in us, and see it, So I just thank you guys for bringing this tonight and the challenge it comes to. And I thank the New Man series we just had because that ties in together with this perfect,
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Libby's a great teacher. And that was a great teaching that Matthew did initially. Brandon just texted me his internet kicked him off. I guess he's been trying to log in and he tried, but it's just we might miss him. So if you have any questions for him, you can always. But I appreciate that, Roger. Yeah, I mean it's about sometimes he does give us a glimpse of what's to come, and that right there, that sometimes is enough, right? It's it gives us a little bit taste of his sweetness and his glory that one day he's gonna share with us. I appreciate that. Jean.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is, it seems as if in this latter day Exodus, that the testing is happening before we go out into the wilderness. As opposed, and am I wrong in that, or is there going to be 40 years of going through the hanging in the wilderness before we get to the promised land?
Well, Well, we are baptized and we are resurrected in Yahushua, so I think we can go through a battle of testing of 40 days. You know, Yahushua definitely had to. And we can circumnavigate through all our tribulations and trials and see if we're really we're cleaning the inside of our cup. But that's far and foremost. Well, there'll be 40 years. I can't really say that there will actually be 40 years that we're going to be, I believe that we are individually through Yahushua being tested, and I think because I mean these were people who did not have the Torah written in their hearts. You know, they needed to be reminded by the outward things and by the priestly ordinances and all that. So I believe our experience, our trials are condensed differently than what they had to go through in Egypt before they enter the promised land.
Okay. I had another question, but I've drawn a blank on it, so I'm gonna have to come back to you when I remember it. Hopefully it won't take very long.
Okay. All right. Brother Cameron.
Yeah, shalom everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you, Brother Jose and Brother Brandon, for the teaching tonight. And this part of the scripture, it has so many little nuggets, as you said, and can go on and on. Something that came up during the messaging or the chatting,
Yeah.
Caleb and Caleb and Joshua. Caleb was from the tribe of Judah. Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim. The dichotomy is always there. It's been always there.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it represents like the two houses going into the land.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's one. I did a really extensive study on the Exodus and the Exodus route, how and where the traveling or the journey took place. And it's amazing because from the time that they were in Egypt proper to the time they went to across the Red Sea to Midian and then up to get to the land, there are 50 places that the Torah mentions, 50 places. And it was really mind-boggling for me that I don't want to say, let's say, the person who designated where Sinai is, when the Sinai mountain is, and the travel and everything else, during Constantine, his mother, I don't remember her name now, but sorry, she's the one who designated most of the places that even today they go and for pilgrimage or to visit, including the Mount Sinai, including the burial place of Yahushua, including the place he was born, and all those were just not historically and geographically proven. It just happened that they wanted to have some pilgrimage and make some money. Anyhow, it would be interesting study for those of you who are interested to look into. There is Midian. Now, what is Sinai Desert? And Brother Brandon mentioned that it's interesting because they went to the wilderness of sin, as in sin. But sin is the name of a god, Mesopotamian false god, not of Egypt, but on the other side, Mesopotamia, the what you call today, like.
It was a moon deity.
Yes, exactly. And it has nothing to do with Egypt.
Or false god.
What I'm telling you is that it might surprise you, but that Sinai, the mountain, is not where it is. Paul even mentions it. It's Sinai in Arabia. So everything that is being constructed and construed by the church, or at that time the Roman church, all bogus. And it's interesting that Yahuwah gives us 50 locations that they stopped at and moved from one to another, and most of those are identified today, and except until they got to the Red Sea, the two branch, nothing else is in Egypt. Everything is the other side, on the Median side, so, or Arabia. Anyhow, there are so many things I just don't. It's not proper to take everybody's time, but this is a very great study, and but as we all know, we have to see the hand of Yah in this, how he delivered them, how he directed them, how he led them to the sea, how they made them to go around and around for 40 years because they were a bunch of not faith or believing without faith or faithless people. And so just one more thing, something that a lot of time comes up and people say, well, how could they be so faithless? They saw all these things, all these miracles. See, and I learned this from one of my teachers. Seeing is not believing. Believing is seeing. In other words, it is with your belief that you understand and you see and you mentally see it, because when you see something after a while, it can leave your mind and you don't remember it. So these people, and that's what Paul says. It says, because they did not combine it with faith. For them, it was just like I think Brother Don said, it was just, their stomach and their physical needs, and what we learned actually from Libby in the last few weeks. It was just a fleshly and a soulish thing. They had no spiritual, no faith in Yahuwah. That's why they died in the desert and they didn't make it to the promised land. Love you all. Shalom.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I think where Sinai is supposed to be, they're saying that used to be called, or it is called now, the Mountain of Luz, which is the Mountain of Light. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like a very small mountain for that size. Imagine like millions of Israelites around that mountain. It's hard for me to actually imagine that. The one that actually they're saying that was Mount Sinai, which is the Mountain of Luz today, supposedly. But thank you, brother. I appreciate your insight and comments.
I think when Yahusha comes, we're going to know where the real stuff's at. There's a lot of evidence that it's not where they say it is.
He'll restore knowledge too, right? In the right way.
Right.
Man, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
It's interesting because that's where, in that area or wherever, that's where Paul went for 3 years and was taught by Yahushua after Damascus. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a place called like the Gulf of Aqaba. That's archaeologically, that's where it was. We're right next to that. Okay, Don.
Shalom.
Brother. Shalom, brother.
Yeah, that was a good teaching. On both you guys did excellent teaching. Yeah, I was with you. It was anointed so many times. Y'all just bear witness with some things that he was sharing with me. And I want to touch on one thing you said, one thing Brandon said, because Brandon talked about Brandon touched basically a lot on the manna and talked about, but in the verse 14 of Exodus 16, it says, and the layer of dew went up, and see, on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, in the polyglot G3016, it says it's a small thin, just a small thin, and thing was added. So it's like a small thin. That word thin is the same word for a mite, like a silver mite, like coin. So because it reflected like ice, it was like frost on the ground or ice, in the polyglass ice, like, so, ice, everybody knows, you get in the morning and see frost on the ground, it's like, looks like silver. So it kind of related to money, and Brandon was talking, he related a lot to money and how, everybody just heard what he said. He was relating a lot about, but then I connected what you were saying and about the sower and the wayside, that word was so by the, you talked about the wayside, the word was so by the wayside, and it says Mark 4:4, and when they hear, 4:15, I'm sorry, and when they hear, Satan comes immediately and takes away the word that was sown in their hearts, that was sown by the wayside. And but in the polyglot, it's the way that's sown by the way, and that word way connects back to the law. First mention is Genesis 3, where it says Yah blocked the way back to the tree of life with that sword, flaming sword, and we know that flaming sword refers to Satan, but and just how that connect. To me, it was just connecting how our hearts, what do we got in our hearts? What's that man in our hearts? Is it for money? Is it for what we can get from, that is that the man that we're getting? Is it feeding us so we can go get what we want? Or is the man feeding us so we can do what Yah wants us to do, and walk in his ways and things like that? And that's what I was connecting out of it. But no, it was really good teaching. I think what you guys shared really connected together, brother.
Yeah.
That we carries this life. We can't, these carries this life is what gets us down. It's what clogs our minds, and how we're going to take care of all these needs we pamper ourselves with, internet, TV, and all these things we want to pamper ourselves with, and it bogs our minds down because we got to make money to pay for these things. And we got to have money. I'm not saying money is wrong. I'm just saying that love of money, that but it bogs our minds down, and it keeps us bogged down, and that is the root of all evil. But yeah, it was just good how you guys connected all that, brother.
Yeah, he never stopped providing too, because the manna was given for 40 years, but as soon as the manna stopped, what happened? There was the wave sheaf in the land of Canaan when Joshua had Passover. So they continue to have their portion of food thereafter. So Yahuwah never stopped providing, not even for a day. He didn't even skip a day. It's amazing.
Right.
They got everything that they did.
It was amazing me how that was connecting, that bread, that manna was connecting to a mite, a silver mite, and Yahushua paid what was the redemption, the price of man. He paid the price. That price was his life, the redemption of man, which is what you was the redemption of silver, So there's so much so much layers, and what you just said made me think about more, because I grab hold a few things and try to connect them, and I'll have to go back and watch this again.
Yeah, redemption means that you are now purchased or bought by Yahushua. That's how he redeems you. He's redeeming you, but now you belong to him.
Yes.
So you're being purchased basically. But it's a good purchase, because now we are, we are in a cut with him.